Welcome back, mamas. Y'all, today we are going to get into overcommitment. We are going to follow up on what we talked about on Tuesday, and I'm going to bring it home by teaching you how to feel confident in your no, how to set boundaries around your time and really discern what's important to you and why saying no is your key, possibly to letting go of that overwhelmed feeling that you may feel before the day even gets started. So let's get to it.
Do you wish you had control of your days, that you had a rhythm, but instead feel overwhelmed, scattered, and like there's never enough time? You're in the right place. I'm Danielle, a recovering workaholic, wife, and stay-at-home mom of 2 girls. I've learned how to reclaim my time and find purpose and freedom so I can be present with my kids and feel like myself again. Here, we embrace where we are, but we don't stay there. So if you're ready to trade the chaos for clarity, the guilt for grace, and the endless to-do list for aligned flow, grab the kiddos a snack and toss in that laundry because I know you're multitasking, and let's do this because your time, your purpose, and you matter.
Okay, mamas. So on Tuesday, we talked about overcommitment and this feeling that we have of overwhelm that can start before the day even gets started because of how many things we have on our plate, how many things that we've committed ourselves to in our minds and also in reality, right? How many things we know we have to do. And I don't know if you have done the exercise yet that I challenged you to do, but I challenged you to write down a list of all the things that you're committed to, whether it be, a commitment to something that is in the future, or whether it is something that you're committed to on an ongoing basis. Maybe you volunteer somewhere, maybe, you have a side hustle. I know you're committed to your job with your kids, right? You're committed to them and all of the household things that are on that list of to-dos. They could go on your list as well, right? So what I want to do today is to help us to look at that list, help us to think about what it is that is important to us and to be able to confidently know that we can say no. So today, I really want to talk about how that overcommitment is not serving you, how that overcommitment is directly tied to your overwhelm and how you can relieve that for yourself, how you can take a look at those things and possibly, say no to new things, but also step out of some of the responsibilities that you may already feel committed to, and you have maybe been committed to in the past, but you are going to realign. We are going to shift. We're going to change gears, and hopefully you're going to learn how to confidently say no to some of those things and feel really good that you're able to do that and not have this guilt associated with it. Okay. So I want to start off first with a quote. This one is from Elizabeth Hasselbeck that says, "Nobody's life is ever all balanced. It's a conscious decision to choose your priorities every day." It is. It's a conscious decision that we make to choose our priorities every day. The podcast is called Prioritize with Purpose for a purpose, right? We need to prioritize the things that are important to us. And that is hard to do when we don't know what is important to us or why, right? And so when we are like people pleasers, right? We like to please others. And so we have a hard time saying no. We like to do things for other people. There are definitely people like me included, that like to do things for other people. I like to help other people out. But then there are the people pleasers, right? That like to help other people out because you're making them happy, not necessarily because it's making you happy, but because it's making them happy. You're literally doing it because of that feeling of that you get when they like you. It's not necessarily that you are wanting to do that thing for them, but you are not able to say no, right? Like you are people pleasing. That is the reason that you're saying no. We have to start thinking about these commitments that we're making as a limitation. Okay. Now, this is counterintuitive to me, right? Because I felt like that was a negative thing, right? Like I felt like that was a glass half empty way of looking at a commitment. But it's actually just reality. It is reality. Every commitment you make is a limitation, right? It is limiting something when you commit to something. You are committing your resources, either your time, your talents, your treasure, whatever it is, and you are committing it to something. Therefore, you are limiting yourself to be able to commit to something else. And I know myself, when I saw this, I'm like, you know what? That is an awful way of looking at things, but it's really actually just the truth, because we are limited beings. There is not an unlimited amount of money. You don't have an unlimited amount of time in a day. You don't have unlimited resources or unlimited energy, right? You need to sleep. You need to eat. You need to refuel your body, right? You don't have unlimited amounts of money. At least I don't think that you do. If you do, call me. But I don't believe that you have unlimited amounts of money, nor do you have unlimited time in your day. Especially as moms, we have less time than ever when we have these little ones that we are responsible for raising, for teaching, for, caring for. And when we have decided to stay at home and do this, that is a responsibility. A lot of times it comes with all of the household duties that come along with that as well, right? Sometimes we are fortunate enough to be able to hire some help to help us with some of those things, but we can't hire help to help us with everything, right? Like we would love to, at least I know I would love to, but that isn't reality because we have limited amounts of things. And so when we commit ourselves to certain things, we are limiting ourselves, okay? And that's the way that we have to look at it, but we don't have to look at that as a negative, right? What is really important to do is to think about what is important to you and why. To really discern what is important to you and why. Things that you have been able to do in the past. These might not be things that you're able to do at the present moment. Your priorities are going to change over time. They are going to shift over time. Right now, your priority may have to be your family and your young children and putting them first and, being able to go here, there, or wherever they need you to go at the drop of a hat, right? That is not always going to be the case. They are going to come to an age where they're going to school, right? And so then you're able to have some time that frees up. But given your season, you have to evaluate your time, your energy, where that needs to be, okay? And think about that in terms of where your commitments are as well, okay? I saw this on Isra Nasir's website that says, signs you have poor boundaries with yourself, overcommitment to others, okay? So this is a sign that you have poor boundaries with yourself. The sign is constantly overcommitting yourself to various tasks, responsibilities, or social engagements without considering your own well-being or capacity. Why this matters. Poor boundaries with yourself may lead to a tendency to say yes to everything, neglecting your personal needs and limits. So this isn't just about you anymore. This is about you and your children, right? When you say yes, when you are overcommitting to other people, the consequences are outside of just you. You are actually impacting the lives of your children, your family as well, right? And so this is something that if we have a tendency to overcommit, this is something that we really need to rein it in once we become a mother. And that can be hard, right? I mentioned that I was going to make it easier for you to say no, or kind of teach you a way to say no to where you didn't feel guilt with it. And I want to read this quote from Stephen Covey that says, "You have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically to say no to other things." Stephen Covey said you have to decide what your highest priorities are. And then you have to have courage. And I know it takes courage to say no a lot of times. but you can do it. I know you can, because if you don't, what you're doing is you're limiting yourself. You're limiting your family. By saying yes to things, you are saying no to other things. It is inevitable. And what is it that we want to say yes to? Are we putting things that we should not be saying yes to first by saying yes to them? And in turn, we're putting things that we would want to say yes to second or last, right? Because we wind up saying no to our highest priorities a lot of times when we say yes to these other things that are preventing us from doing what is actually important to us. And as I mentioned before, these priorities will change over time. So you don't have to always say no. One way that I actually love that you can say no is to say, I'm sorry, I'm not available for that. Now, you do not always have to apologize. I know that's what a lot of us do. Myself, I am guilty of it as well, is I tend to apologize, right? Like I say I'm sorry, or I say, oh, I can't. No, I'm so sorry, but I can't. Now, you might be sorry, but are you sorry? Like, is that truly what you mean? Do you have anything to be sorry for? And if you do feel like, yes, oh gosh, I wish I could do that, right? Then maybe the I'm sorry is warranted. However, you are maybe just not available, right? That is not a priority for you. If you are not available for something, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're busy. Well, you are busy, but maybe you don't have something specific on your calendar at that given time, right? But that doesn't mean that you do not have things that you need to do, and you have things that take priority that are going to take your time that make you unavailable for whatever it is that the person is asking of you, right? Some ways that you can kind of reframe this in your head are if you're thinking about things like the only reason you can say no to something is if you cannot do it, right? That's not true. You need to reframe that and think about your priorities and say, gosh, that is not a priority for me right now, which makes me not be able to do it, right? Which makes me have to say no to it. It's not necessarily that I can't, but if I do, I know that I am jeopardizing my own priorities, which then kind of does mean that you can't, right? But when you say you can't, I know at least for me, I'm not comfortable with it because technically we can do whatever we put our mind to, right? Like whatever you decide you want to give time to, you can. So it's not really that you can't because you're already committed to some other thing on your calendar at that specific time. So you could do it, but it's just not a priority. So you say, I'm sorry, I'm not available for that. I'm not available for that. That is something that you can do. These don't have to be big commitments either. There are things that maybe at the present moment or with where you are, the bandwidth that you have, the responsibilities that you feel, the stress that you're under, whether it is just you feel this overwhelm or you've created this overwhelm for yourself, still that is warranted. You still have to give weight to the fact that you are overwhelmed, and your mental health and the way that you're parenting and the way that you're able to parent from a place that you want to be a good example, be a good role model, all of these things for your kids, that you want to be in a healthy place. You want to not be overwhelmed, not be stressed, not be overcommitted. And so when you are, asked to do certain things, you may have to say that you're not available for that, whether that is like picking up the mail for your brother or your sister or your mom or dad or whatever while they're out of town. That is a task that maybe you would normally do, right? But really, if you think about it, your parents or whatever, but if you're having to drive to someone else's house to get their mail while they're out of town, that is a commitment, right? And honestly, they could call and stop their mail or get online, stop your mail, and that would eliminate you having to drive over there to pick up their mail for them, right? For me, like saying yes and picking up a jazzercise class, normally that's something that I would love to do. However, because I'm not teaching anymore, I'm only a sub. When I say yes to picking up a class, if I'm not in a space where I have a class prepared, then I have to think about, okay, I not only have to teach the class, drive to the class, teach it, drive home, but I have to prepare for the class because I might not have a set ready to go that I can just pop in and teach. I might actually have to put a whole set together to be able to substitute for someone. And so it's a bigger commitment than just picking up a class. And these are things you have to think about when you're saying yes to things. Agreeing to, pick up a meal for a meal train, volunteering at the PTA or volunteering at your church, or being in charge of a teacher gift for teacher appreciation, collecting all that money and shopping for the gift and doing all these things. These are things that maybe you have done in the past. And maybe you actually would enjoy doing them typically, but are you in a space? Do you have the capacity right now to handle these things, to do these things? And you don't know this unless you've taken the time to figure out what your priorities are, what the commitments are already on your plate, instead of just constantly saying yes or agreeing to things, knowing what you've got going on and planning and being able to know, okay, can I do that for someone, right? Can I do that? Instead of just saying yes, you can say, I'm not available for that. Or there are other things you can say, right? You can say, let me check my availability. I would love to do that, but let me check my availability real quick. And get back to them. That is okay. You are able to do that. And guess what? If someone swoops in and somebody else does it and takes it off your plate, that's amazing. And if you have the bandwidth, then you can go back and say yes. But do follow up with that person, right? Check your availability and get back to them. But don't be as quick to just jump and say yes to things anymore, right? I know sometimes these things can seem hard to say no, but you can reframe it in your brain so that your no doesn't mean you're less than. Your no doesn't mean that you don't want to. Your no doesn't mean that you're not compassionate or not generous or anything like that. Your no just means you really, honestly, you've taken a look at your priorities and you cannot take that on right now. You do not have the space. You do not have the bandwidth. You do not have the capacity. You do not have the time, energy, money, right? You do not have it right now. And you have to be confident in knowing that that is okay, that people are still going to like you, even though you can't pick up everything, right? Even though you can't say yes to everything, that you are still valued, that you are still worthy, because a lot of times I know that we put our value and our worth in what other people think of us, right? And we put our value in what we are doing for others. Especially as moms, I know we do this, but you have yourself and your kids and your priorities to think about. And that is not selfish, especially at this time, right? Now, I'm not saying that there aren't ways to say no that are like a little rude and that, might not be the best. I found this list of ways to say no and I thought, oh gosh, some of these can come off the really wrong way if you say them in such a way, like it almost sounds like you're better than someone else or that you're just completely blowing them off. And I know that's not the impression that you would want to give anyone. But you can say things, even some of these things that I was reading, and I'll just read you some of them. It says, I'm going to have to pass, right? If you say that in a certain way, I'm going to have to pass. Like that you're just kind of like brushing someone off, right? But if you say, I am so sorry, I am going to have to pass. And what I don't want you to get into is like explaining why you have to say no. Like you don't have to explain. Nobody needs an explanation of why you can't help. But I also know that you also probably don't want to come off like you are just brushing someone off, right? And that is not the way that you would want to come off. And so you can say no, or I'm sorry, I'm going to have to pass this time. You can leave it at that and not have to explain yourself away. I don't have the bandwidth at the moment. That may be like completely 100% true, but depending on what you're saying no to, that could sound a little bit condescending, right? Like, I don't have the bandwidth to deal with you right now, right? Like, I don't know. It depends on what the ask was. Unfortunately, I'm at capacity. Like, that sounds like all these things, again, they may be true, but depending on how you say them, they could also come off a different way. I thought it was really funny. Another one I saw was, while I'd love to say yes, my plate is full. And, one of the things that I think we can get into if we're not careful is, I'd love to say yes when honestly you wouldn't love to say yes, right? Like, we don't want to tell somebody that we would love to say yes, or maybe, that is just something that you say like, oh, I'd love to say yes, but my plate is full right now. I just can't, right? I'm not available for that. What I had said earlier, this is like the catch-all. Like, you can say that pretty much to anyone at any time. Also, y'all, no, thank you. Like, that is completely an option. No and no, thank you. No, thank you. That is a full sentence. That is a complete sentence. People do not necessarily need an explanation of why you can't do something. Now, if you've committed to something and if you typically do this or whatever, then maybe yes, the person is going to deserve an explanation. But when you cannot do something, you do not need to feel bad for saying no. You do not need to feel bad for prioritizing your time and the things that you're doing that are important to you and your family. Right? I am not saying become this self-centered person. I do not think that is what any of you are going to do. I am just saying it is going to take a little bit of courage, right? Like Stephen Covey was saying, you can unapologetically, but pleasantly, smilingly, right? Say no. Have the courage to do that. And I know that can be hard. And that's why I feel like I spent a little bit extra time on this today. But I want to read one last quote here from Roy Disney. Roy E. Disney said, when your values are clear to you, making decisions becomes easier. When your values are clear to you, making decisions becomes easier. So those decisions of what you do say yes to, those decisions of where you do spend your time, they are going to become a lot clearer once you do that. Once you do that work that is the foundation of everything that we talk about on this podcast. It is exactly what we do in my coaching. We get clear on your values, on your strengths, on what you want and why, and then you're able to have this filtration system, if you will. You're able to have all of these things with which to filter your decisions through so that you can make an informed decision of yes or no to your commitments and not feel like your no is something that you have to feel guilty for. Because when you're not clear on that, when you're not clear on these things, you can feel guilty, right? Because it's something that you always do. It's something that you would typically do. It's something that maybe brings you joy. It's something that maybe you'll go back to doing at some point. But right now, you have to say no to, okay? And it should get easier once you have those things figured out. Right? But if you remember nothing else from today, remember, sorry, I am not available for that. Remember that. Okay. And go to Prioritize with Purpose, prioritizewithpurpose.com to my website and schedule a prioritization clarity call with me if you would like help walking through any of this or getting clear on those values and that foundational work that we do in my coaching. I would love to help you with that. Okay. And so until next week, y'all.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, Mama. If so, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and then hit share and send this to a mom who needs this in her day. I'll meet you right back here next week. Keep smiling, y'all.